She dropped the ring on my desk at 6:12 p.m., after everyone else had already gone home, and said, "I need you to know something before I say anything else." I thought she was about to ask me to keep a secret about her wedding. What she actually said rearranged the next 4 years of my life in about 90 seconds. My name is Marcus Reyes. I'm 29. I manage the analytics team at a mid-sized logistics company in Denver, and until that Tuesday evening, my biggest workplace concern was whether the new intern was ever going to learn how to format a pivot table. My coworker was Dana Whitfield, 28, our client relations lead, the kind of person who remembered everyone's coffee order without being asked twice, and somehow made a Monday morning status meeting feel almost bearable. We'd sat 2 desks apart for 3 years, ever since she transferred over from the Chicago office and got assigned the empty cubicle next to mine because nobody else wanted to be that close to the break room. Dana and I became work friends fast, then just friends, in the way that happens when you spend more waking hours with someone than you do with the people you actually chose to live with. We grabbed coffee before 9 a.m. meetings. We covered for each other when deadlines got ugly. We developed the kind of shorthand where one look across the office meant an entire conversation about how insufferable a client call had just been. People in the office used to joke that we finished each other's sentences and presentations, and we always brushed it off the same way. Just work friends. Just close colleagues. I said it enough times that I nearly convinced myself, except on the nights I drove home replaying something she'd said and wondering why it stuck with me the way it did. Here's what I never told anyone, not even my own roommate. About a year and a half into working next to Dana, I noticed I was rearranging my schedule around hers without admitting that's what I was doing. I noticed she twirled her pen when she was nervous before a big pitch. I noticed she always ate lunch at her desk on Fridays because she said the break room felt too loud after a full week. I noticed the exact tone of her laugh when something was actually funny versus when she was just being polite to a client. I noticed everything, and I filed it all under things that didn't matter because Dana had a fiancé, and coworkers who fall for engaged coworkers don't get to have opinions about any of it. So I stayed in my lane. I watched her plan a wedding for over a year. I helped her pick out font samples for invitations during a slow afternoon, told her the script one looked more like her, and meant every word of it, while quietly hating how good I was at being supportive. That Tuesday, she'd left early, telling our team she had a florist appointment to finalize centerpieces. I figured I'd see her Wednesday morning with swatches and opinions about eucalyptus versus baby's breath. Instead, around 6, long after most of the floor had cleared out, I heard her heels coming down the hallway toward my desk, slower than usual, like she was working up to something with every step. "You're still here," I said, closing my laptop halfway. "So are you," she said, and her voice sounded thinner than it usually did, stretched out over something she hadn't said yet. "Florist ran long?" She didn't answer that. She just walked over, pulled out the chair from the empty desk beside mine, and sat down slowly, like her legs had made the decision before the rest of her caught up. That's when I saw it. The ring wasn't on her hand. It was sitting in her palm. "Dana? It's off," she said. "We called it off. About 4 hours ago, actually, in the middle of a florist appointment, which is a genuinely humiliating place to have the worst conversation of your life." I sat there for a second, trying to catch up. "I'm so sorry. What happened?" "Nothing dramatic," she said, and let out a laugh that had no humor in it at all. "That's almost the worst part. No cheating, no big blow-up. He just asked me, kind of out of nowhere, if I was actually excited, or if I was just going through the motions because it was already in motion. And I couldn't answer him. I sat there staring at centerpiece photos and couldn't give him a straight yes. That's a hard thing to sit with. "It's worse than hard," she said. Because the second he asked, I already knew the answer, and it terrified me, because it wasn't about him at all. My chest tightened in a way I wasn't prepared for at 6:15 on a Tuesday. "What do you mean?" Dana turned her chair to face mine fully, and something in her expression made the empty office feel a lot smaller than it had a minute earlier. "I mean, I've spent over a year planning a wedding to a genuinely good man," she said, And somewhere in there I started comparing every quiet moment we had to 15 minutes at this desk with you. I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure I trusted my own voice yet. I used to think it was normal. She continued. You know, having a work friend you got along with really well. But then I'd catch myself timing my lunch to yours. I'd catch myself telling you things before I told him, important things, and I kept telling myself that was just efficiency, because your desk was closer than my phone. Dana, let me finish, she said, holding up a hand, and I could tell she needed to get through it before she lost her nerve. Today, in that florist shop, he asked if I was excited, and all I could think about was how you remembered my coffee order changed to oat milk before I even mentioned it out loud to anyone. And I thought, if that's the thing occupying my brain during my own wedding planning, I owe it to both of us to actually look at that instead of ignoring it until the wedding day. So you called it off because of coffee orders? I called it off because of 100 small things that all led back to you, she said, and her eyes were wet now, though her voice stayed steady. I kept waiting for you to say something first. For months. Honestly, for longer than that. I thought if you ever brought it up, it would make this easier, because then it wouldn't just be me sitting on something ridiculous by myself. I felt something crack open in my chest, 2 years of careful distance collapsing in real time. I didn't say anything because you were engaged, Dana. What was I supposed to do? Interrupt your wedding planning to tell you I couldn't stop noticing things about you that weren't mine to notice. So you did notice. I noticed everything, I admitted. I've been noticing for so long I stopped keeping track of when it started. I just decided it didn't matter, because you'd already made your choice, and it wasn't going to be me. And now? Now you're sitting next to me holding a ring that isn't on your finger anymore. Telling me you were waiting for me to say something, I said. So I think we're past pretending this was ever just about coffee orders. Dana let out a breath that shook slightly, somewhere between crying and laughing, the kind of sound that happens when relief and grief show up in the same moment. I really thought I was going to marry him and just quietly carry this forever, she said. I had this whole plan where the feeling would eventually fade once the wedding actually happened, and everything would settle into normal. How was that plan holding up? Poorly, she admitted. Catastrophically, actually, asked the florist. She watched me completely fall apart over centerpiece photos for reasons that had nothing to do with flowers. For what it's worth, I didn't know I was the reason behind any of this until about 90 seconds ago. You weren't trying to be, Dana said, softer now. You were just always there, being exactly the kind of person I didn't let myself want. I just wasn't honest about it until today forced my hand. I reached over and took her free hand, the one not holding the ring. Careful in the way you're careful when something feels too important to rush. Dana, I need to say something, because I think today deserves honesty instead of more careful distance. I've thought about this, about us, more often than I ever let myself admit, even to myself on the drive home. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be the reason your relationship fell apart if it did. And now that it has, for reasons that had nothing to do with you saying anything at all, then I get to actually tell you the truth, I said, which is that I've wanted this for longer than I'm proud of, and I spent that whole time telling myself it wasn't allowed. Her expression softened into something unguarded, something I'd never once seen from Dana in 3 years, not during the worst client crises, not during any deadline. You've been sitting on this the entire time I was planning a wedding? Quietly, I said, uncomfortably quietly, in hindsight. It's not the most uncomfortable thing that happened today, she said. I called off an engagement in a florist shop and then drove straight to the office instead of going home. When you frame it that way, I feel significantly less strange about my own version of this. She laughed again, and this time it had no grief left in it, just something warm and slightly stunned that any of this was actually happening under fluorescent office lighting on a random Tuesday. So what happens now? She asked, because I don't think I can go back to normal after saying all of that out loud. I don't want you to, I said. I've been ready to stop pretending for a long time. I just needed you to get here on your own, because I was never going to ask you to choose between me and an engagement. You didn't have to ask, she said quietly. I think some part of me was choosing this the whole time, I just didn't let myself say it until today made it impossible to keep avoiding. I wasn't exactly forcing the issue either, I said. I was committed to a strategy of saying absolutely nothing and hoping you'd figure it out eventually. Was the plan wait indefinitely and hope she calls off her own wedding? When you say it like that, it sounds significantly worse than it felt in my head. Bold strategy for a data analyst. Deeply flawed, in hindsight. She was still holding my hand, the ring resting loosely in her other palm, and the careful professional distance we'd both maintained for 3 years quietly dissolved somewhere in that empty office. "Can I say one more thing?" she asked. "Always." I think part of why I said yes to him in the first place was because it felt safer than sitting with what I actually felt about someone I saw every single day at work, she admitted. It felt easier to build a life with someone I didn't have to be scared of losing over an office friendship gone wrong. "I understand that more than you'd think," I said. "I've been doing a version of the same thing, just with silence instead of an engagement ring. Neither of those were particularly brave choices." "No," I agreed. "But you drove here tonight and said the honest thing anyway. That took more nerve than 3 years of me saying nothing ever did." Dana looked at me for a long moment, something steady settling into her face where the tears had been minutes earlier. "I don't want to overanalyze the next part," she said. "I think I've done enough analyzing for one Tuesday." "Then don't." So she leaned in, slow enough that either of us could have stopped it, and neither of us did. It didn't feel sudden. It felt like something that had been waiting patiently under fluorescent office lights for 3 years, finally given permission to happen. When we pulled back, she rested her forehead against my shoulder for a second, something she'd never once done in 3 years of desks pushed close together. "Well," she said, "this is not how I expected my engagement to end when I left for a florist appointment this morning. Bold of you to call off a wedding and drive straight back to the office instead of going home to process it. In my defense, it worked out. It really did." Dana lifted her head and looked at me, something playful returning to her expression now that the hardest part of the day was behind her. "For the record, he really is a good guy. You should probably feel a little bad about being the reason his wedding got canceled." "I'll carry that guilt," I said. "I think I'll manage." About a year later, Dana and I hosted our own small engagement dinner in a restaurant 3 blocks from that same office, at a table not far from where our floor's after-work happy hours used to happen. When coworkers asked how we finally got together, Dana liked to tell people, "I called off my wedding in a florist shop and then drove straight to the office to tell him why." I always add, and I'd apparently been noticing everything about her for years and just never said it out loud, which is either patient or a little pathetic, depending on who you ask. Either way, it worked out exactly the way it needed to. So tell me, if a coworker showed up after ending their engagement and told you they'd been waiting for you to say something first, what would you have said? And have you ever realized you were the reason someone was quietly reconsidering their entire life, without either of you saying it out loud until one honest moment forced it into the open? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.